All right, I would ask everyone to please take a seat. We're getting ready to start. Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone this afternoon and call the meeting to order. This is my first meeting as I chair the MFP Task Force. However, as many of you know, I've been involved in some capacity with the MFP over the past 30 years, being on the original MFP study committee in the early 90s and chairing that as well. I think it was around 1991 or 92 at that point. So Tony Davis has done a tremendous job chairing this committee, and I know that we together will continue to make a positive impact on the children of Louisiana. So with that, can we please take a roll call?
Mr. Bourne?
Here.
Mr. Rowehouse?
Here.
Superintendent Brumley?
Here.
Mr. Castile?
Here.
Mr. Claxton?
Here.
Dr. Corville?
Here.
Mr. David is not in attendance. Senator Fields? Representative Garofalo? Is not in attendance. Mr. Garvey? Is not in attendance. Ms. Gleason? Is not in attendance. Mr. Hartley? Is not in attendance. Ms. McReynolds? Present. Dr. Mills?
Here.
Ms. Monica? Is not in attendance. Ms. Nevels? Is not in attendance. Ms. Polizzo? Is not in attendance. Ms. Posey?
Present.
Dr. Procopio?
Here.
Ms. Romer?
Here.
Ms. Smith?
Here.
Ms. Stubbs? Is not in attendance. Ms. Boucher?
Here.
Dr. Baker?
Here.
Mr. Buhall? Is not in attendance. Ms. Bonger?
Here.
Ms. Whitney?
Here.
You have a quorum.
All right, thank you. First item on the agenda, approval of the minutes from January 19th. Do I have a motion? Ms. Mills, second. Ms. McReynolds. Any objections? Hearing none, motion passes. Okay, item number 3, consideration of the discussion. Need a motion to consider the discussion. Ms. Reynolds, second. Mr. Castile. All right, with us this afternoon, opening the discussion, I'd like to recognize Jay Darden, who's our Commissioner in the Division of Administration, and we've asked him to come this afternoon to give us an overview, I guess, of the state as it relates to finance and budget. Jay?
Thank you very much. It's nice to be with you. Nice to see some folks I haven't seen in quite a while. It's good to be with you and give you kind of an overview of where we are. We presented, as you know, the executive budget to the Joint Legislative Committee on the Budget last week, and for the first time in a long time, we're not talking about cuts in the budget. We're actually talking about some plus-ups, which is obviously very good news. Coming as a surprise, I think, to a lot of people, given the downturn in the economy as a result of the pandemic, but because of our ability to maximize the use of fund swaps, we were able to maximize the use of general fund dollars that enable us to make some recommendations for improvements in higher education. So that's really, and K12 education, which has been the governor's priority. I know all of you have seen the governor's recommended $40 million increase designed for teacher pay. It's obviously not enough in terms of what we would like to do, but it's a start. The governor indicated he wanted to meet and hopefully surpass the Southern average based upon SREB numbers during his second term, and we're getting there, and we hope and expect to get there as soon as we can. The $40 million represents a $400 pay for certain certificated teachers and $200 pay for support workers. The chart that I'm just looking at right here, which we've seen about the SREB average, I'm not sure, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm told that this source doesn't necessarily include the $1,000 pay raise that was given back in 20, and so we do have to add that to it, so it's not quite as bad as what you would suggest on where we ranked on that form. The legislature obviously is going to take a close look at our recommendations regarding the budget, and as I've told educators, K12 and higher ed, the legislature, and I know I saw Senator Fields is here, and I know other legislators are going to be curious to know what the department's going to be doing with the money that it received in December from Congress, and what it may be doing with future dollars that come in a new stimulus bill, which most people think is imminent. Not sure what all it's going to have in it, what kind of limitations it's going to have in it, but both K12 and higher ed got a significant amount of money directly from Congress in the action that was taken in December before the new administration took over. Fairly, I don't want to use the word, I don't think unrestricted is fair to say, but not with the same limitations that were in place in the CARES Act. And so we're expecting a lot more liberality in any new action that is taken by Congress in the next few weeks that will give all of us, including the state, significant discretion on what we do with those new dollars. Some of the markups have indicated that it can be used for replacement revenue, which was something that CARES could not be used for, that will get the attention of a lot of folks in this room, as well as others, since the revenue loss was the main thing that crippled so many of us last year when the pandemic unexpectedly hit. So we'll be real curious about what limitations are in place and what we can do with that new money, but it's going to afford the education community in general some tremendous opportunities. And we did not recommend any new dollars for early childhood education, although it is obviously an important priority for all of us. The reason we didn't is frankly, the department has yet determined what its recommendations are going to be for that money that's available to the department from the December allocation. And I know that there's a significant amount of money that's discretionary with the department, and we want to work with you and all of you and see what we can do to make certain that early childhood education is a part of whatever new dollars are coming to us and whatever dollars we may have already received. We're going to ask you to include a 1.375% increase in the MFP to expend, I think that's the right percentage, to expend that $40 million for teacher pay raise. Previously that had been placed in level 3, and leave it to your discretion as to the appropriate way to do it. It seems to us that that's probably the best place for it. So that's really our request regarding the MFP in particular, to make certain those dollars that are earmarked for the pay raise can be part of the MFP and then become part of the base as we move forward into future years. So with that, I'll be happy to try and answer some questions if y'all have any particular questions, but that's really the overview that I wanted to give you and tell you that we're excited about the opportunities for education that are going to be coming our way. The governor is committed to education as our top priority, and we're going to do everything we can to preserve dollars that are recommended in the budget through the legislative process and encourage additional dollars to be forthcoming when we see what else may be available from the federal government.
Questions?
So you mentioned that this sheet that we got does not include the pay raises from last year. Do we have what that figure, should be, or do we have an estimate of where we're closer to?
It was $1,000, wasn't it? The last one was printed, so.
Yes.
So
This is the latest information that SRAB provides us as they compare to all the states. We actually have Louisiana's average already issued on the website, and it was 51,566 for 1920. We do have that available, but this is the only comparison that we have available for the SRAB.
Okay, and the proposed pay raises it's $400 a month and $200 a month, or is it 400 total?
Wish it was, it's
For
400
the year. Okay, well, there's confusion among other groups. Like some people were like, oh, well, that's $400 a year. I was like, I have no idea. So some people are thinking it's $400 a month.
Well,
In the community.
I wish it could be, but it's not.
Okay.
I don't know. I kind of want that $400 a month pay raise. Yeah, always good to see you and everything, Brent. What's the total size of the budget right now? 36 billion?
Yeah, right around 36 billion, when you include all the federal dollars. The state general fund is remember the exact number, I have it with me, mid-nines. Fairly consistent when you look at the state general fund on a bar chart. It's been fairly consistent over the course of about the past 10 or 12 years. A little bit of variation, but it actually was over 10 billion proposed a year ago at this time when we thought we were going to be doing fine, but it's down now.
Ms. Mills?
The question was recently just brought up about the $1,000 not being included in the Louisiana average. Does that also mean that the regional average possibly fluctuated as well?
I don't know.
It could be. These are numbers based on the 18-19 year, and that's the latest SREB list for that.
Okay, because to put out that number, that 51,566 for 1920, I'm interested to see what the Southern Regional average has for 1920 as well.
I can.
All right.
Thanks. It's about $4,000, Dr. Mills. In fact, actually, I just Googled because I knew Texas is a big raise, and Texas is $5,000 after this was published.
That's what I recall as well.
Okay, any other questions, Mr. Robinson?
Actually, it's just a comment. Just for a point of reference, the Mississippi Senate passed earlier this year a $1,000 pay raise. Texas, actually, for those teaching over 5 years, the pay raise was $5,200. Under 5 years was $3,800. And then Arkansas is proposing a $2,000 raise over 2 years. Just for a point of reference.
Commissioner, could you talk a little bit about, was there a projected deficit for this coming year and what adjustments y'all had to make, or
No.
give us an overview?
Yeah, well, no, there is no deficit. There was an expectation that there might be because of the pandemic, and we were preparing for that all throughout the year, reporting to JLCB every month about a deficit avoidance plan that did not need to come into fruition. We have a surplus that's been recognized from FY20 of over $200 million. We have an excess in the current year that is right now about $270 million. We will end this year, we think, with an excess that'll enable us to do some things in the supplemental appropriation bill during the session. And after that, those allocations are made, if the legislature agrees, I anticipate that we'll have a surplus when this year ends and is finally documented later this summer. So we've really been on the right path and the right trajectory over the course of the past couple of years. The pandemic has thrown everybody for a loop, but nonetheless, because we lowered the forecast so much last year at this time, we're over the forecast for this year, which is why we have an excess. It doesn't seems inconsistent that we could have an excess when the economy's been down, but that's the reason why our expectations were pretty low and we've exceeded them. And frankly, I think we're going to see another increase when REC meets in April or May. I'm hopeful for that. We adopted the low forecast at the meeting a month ago, being conservative. So we didn't have quite as much as we thought we might have had we adopted a little bit more optimistic forecast. But I think before the bill makes it through the process, I'm hopeful that you're going to see more money in the state general fund if we continue to see the kind of progress that we've seen thus far in the state's economy. So we've not been in a deficit mode, and I don't think we will be in the immediate future.
Commissioner, thank you for being here. I was going to raise these issues anyway, but it's really great to hear it. So is it the administration's proposal to be a 1.75% formula increase and the pay raise?
No, that's to fund the state portion of any pay raise that's given.
So, okay, so it's equivalent to a 1.75, and then you put in
As I appreciate it, and Beth, if somebody can correct me, the proposed percent increase in the MFP would fund the $40 million that's necessary to provide that.
okay, so 1.75, but it would be directed to go toward.
Well, the 1375 would generate about $40 million statewide, but it would not be
1375. Okay.
1.375.
And is there an additional request on the base beyond? I'm just getting your proposals.
No.
Okay. And does that amount, and this might be for either one of you, does that amount, the 40 million, include the additional retirement contributions?
It does.
It does. Okay, good. Those are two easy. And then the third one, could you speak? I know this was when you presented the budget was an issue that I know you're concerned about in terms of the fact that, 721 million of this that's in the budget or proposed budget is temporary. I don't know if it's one time. Depending on what happens in Congress, we might have a little more money next year or more money now that we move to next year. But at the end of the day, it's going to be temporary. It's sort of a plan on dealing with weeding ourselves off of that.
Yeah, and obviously it's something we've talked about, we're concerned about. The last year's budget and this year's budget are obviously heavily dependent upon the infusion of federal dollars. And we know that they're going to go away sooner or later, but they are designed to enable states, not just Louisiana, but all states, deal with the downturn that everybody had to face as a result of the COVID. So our expectation is that, well, let me back up. The main driver of the ability to provide new dollars in the current year's budget is that the feds have changed the Medicaid match rate. For every treatment of a Medicaid patient in Louisiana, the feds pay a portion and the state pays a portion. As a result of the pandemic, the Fed said, we're going to increase our contribution by 6.2%. And this amounts to an awful lot of money. They've been doing it by quarters. And so we've known all along that we've got an increase on, say, the first quarter of fiscal year 21. Then it was extended to the second quarter of fiscal year 21. So it's been incrementally increased. When the Biden administration took over, they made it clear that they were going to extend the emergency FMAP, is what it's called, through the end of calendar year 21. That meant that we were preparing the budget, we didn't know that, and so we weren't expecting that additional plus up until the very last minute when it came. And so it's those 2 quarters that have been extended from July to December of this year that have enabled us to realize well over $300 million in the proposed budget that's enabling us to do what we need to do. One of the recommendations that the governor has made to the administration is that when it comes time to reduce that back to where it was, that it be phased over a period of time so that we'll have more than just 1 year to try and make up for the use of this, quote, one-time money from the federal government. We obviously are also counting on a significant increase in economic activity in the state to help us plan for things in the future. As I mentioned last year at this time, we were presenting a budget that was over $10 billion in state general fund, and the economy was going like this. And both the legislative economists and the divisions economists were predicting a steady increase in revenue to the state. I mean, we really felt like we were on a very positive, strong trajectory. And we're hoping that when things rebound, that same trajectory can be reestablished. And that we'll start getting the kind of income we're looking for from state resources as we look at the out years. So there's not a magic wand we can wave right now and say that $700 million or $600 million is going to be replaced by this source of revenue. The governor's not going to propose new taxes. The legislature is not going to vote for new taxes. I don't look for any additional revenue coming in that arena. But we do think the improvement in the economy is going to be significant enough, and hopefully a phasing of these federal dollars can help us, as well as doing some things with what would be a second CARES Act that would enable us, I hope, to use a lot of those dollars for one-time purposes, recognizing that they're one-time revenue. It would free up some money in the general fund in the years ahead.
Any other questions of the commissioner? Because he's going to have to leave after we complete this questioning period. So anyone else would like to?
Is he open to negotiating?
Well, always. Since Fields is here, and we're very used to negotiating with the legislature, and we certainly are going to be open to talking about the issue that y'all are concerned about. I mean, we felt like we could only do what we did in this proposal, but as I said, this This is a moving target. It's one that we're going to continue to try and fund more this year if possible, and if not, as we move forward.
And the revenue estimating conference will meet again in April, and if they recognize additional revenue, then there may be some
Yes, it's going to,
possibility of,
it'll meet, I think we'll probably meet again in April. We definitely will meet in May before the bill leaves the Appropriations Committee. We typically would meet in early May. I used to be the chairman. It rotates every year. I'm not the chairman this year, so I don't know what Clay's going to do in terms of when he calls a meeting, but it'll either be in April or May. And we'll have another 2 months or one solid month's worth of data and some early information, if it's in May, of what April looks like. You know, income tax returns are not due till May, and most filers wait until the last minute if they have to pay. If they want a refund, of course, they file early, but we won't know what those income tax numbers look like for the state by the time the bill leaves the House, but we'll have a pretty good picture if we are continuing to move in the right direction. The governor's going to be announcing momentarily some loosening of the restrictions. I'm not stealing his thunder because I think he goes at 1 o'clock, but he's going to be making some meaningful changes in the restrictions that are in place that we hope are going to continue moving us in the right direction.
You mentioned higher education. I know, so just, they got money directly from the feds as well. How much in the current budget that was just proposed, if any, was dedicated to higher education?
A significant amount. Again, I don't have my numbers in front of me, but a pay raise for faculty members is recommended. An allocation toward mandated costs for higher ed, a $14 million increase in formula funding. I don't know what it all comes to, but it's a significant amount. And last year we had recommended similar changes that we had to back off of when the pandemic struck. But it's a significant boost for higher education.
With the pay raises, where, and this probably going out on the weeds here, where is like Louisiana's professors, like average wise, if there is something?
Yeah,
And then what was like the proposed raise for them?
We didn't propose a specific raise. We allocated a dollar amount for regents and the various management boards to make a determination about how those raises are going to be given. They're ranked very low SREB and very low nationally on an overall average. I don't recall as I sit right here exactly what those positions are, but they're not particularly good with our peer institutions.
Okay, thanks.
all right, well, Commissioner, thank you very much for taking your time to come visit with us this afternoon. We appreciate that overview and your willingness to answer anything that we had.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Good to see y'all, and I'm happy to come back as we progress during the process.
Okay.
Let's see.
All right, and I'll open the floor for discussion. All right, Keith.
I don't know if that was a spoiler, but I guess y'all were expecting it. Hi, everybody. Chairman Boyer, I really appreciate you giving me the time to speak. Look, I kind of wanted to start by talking about some first principles, having a little discussion amongst ourselves before we get into anything, recommendation-wise. But I've been thinking a lot about this meeting, and someone I deeply respect. I ended up reading a book, and I read a book about being reasonable versus being unreasonable in life and business. And I just kind of want to start that with first principles. We call ourselves the MFP Task Force. We come here all the time, and look, I love seeing y'all. Y'all are all great people, but what do we actually do? Why are we here? I mean, in all seriousness, why are we here? We keep talking every year about we need more money for districts, for schools, we need more money for teacher pay. We have conversations that go around the room, and it feels like people really care about being reasonable, or it doesn't have to be reasonable right now. I feel like being, frankly, a little unreasonable, you help move the conversation, and time after time again, our schools, our teachers, we lose out because somewheres in this state, there's some wheel every year that's squeaking louder than us. This year, apparently, college professors are getting a pretty good raise. Was it 2 years ago? It was judges. While teachers were getting less than 1%. You know, the bottom line, I think, is that we need to really set the goalposts, because we keep talking about starting things for teachers, and we never talk about finishing it, right? It's always about, we're gonna be at the Southern Regional average one day, let's do 1,000. Last year, before it was canceled, was 500. Now we actually have more money, and they're talking a surplus, but it's down to 400. So I just think that the goalpost, if this is a football game, the goalposts keep moving. Losing to Texas, when Texas does a $5,000 raise, and look, this ain't about politics either. The Republicans are the ones that did that in Texas. You know, we gotta move past this partisanship, Democrat versus Republican. Everybody needs to come together for our schools, for our teachers. The bottom line is, I kind of want us to start the conversation there before I start adding zeros to the governor's proposal. The bottom line is, I think that we really need to come together as a committee and define what our purpose is. And need to get away the paradigm of that we try to produce a finished product that we get to DESE. I think we need to make recommendations, and we be the ones that establish a goal and remind people of them. And also further, and y'all, I'm not gonna totally plagiarize the man, but I know Mike Falk's around here, and he always brings up and discusses that there's actually not really an assessment. And going out to schools, working with school leaders, talking to district leaders, I mean, a lot of the public doesn't realize that 10% of your money is out of the door before the kids even step foot in the door with transportation. And that's even more, a lot more than 10% in some districts. I think it's really about time, and maybe as a task force, we are the ones that study this, but I think it's important that we actually assess what it costs to educate children. And I think that even if we don't do anything with that information immediately, it's particularly powerful and useful for our work as an MFP Task Force. So I wanted to throw that out there. I would love to make a motion to add a zero to the governor's proposal. I will probably do so in a little bit, and if someone wants to do more, well, I commend you, I'll second it. But the bottom line is, I really think we need to discuss as a group what our role and what we view our role as a task force is. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? I can't believe everyone is so quiet this afternoon.
I'm never shy.
No, keep on. I'm gonna go around again. Tia, go ahead.
I do have something that I want to say. You know, I talked to a lot of my colleagues after this proposal was made, and some of them were extremely hurt by it. They felt disrespected, and I think ultimately, that's what they asked for. They want to be respected as professionals. They deserve that. And we should certainly give them that. They go into the classrooms every day. They get on the buses every day. They are in the cafeterias every single day. And they never stopped. While other states were doing virtual, they never stopped at the beginning of the school year. I mean, from the very beginning. Knowing that they were at risk, knowing that they were frontline essential workers, they still continue to do what they did. And they still are. I mean, some districts provided a stipend for them doing the magnificent work that they were doing. That was great. While others, you know, I'm pretty sure if they could afford to, they would, but they just simply couldn't do it. I lost a lot of colleagues during this pandemic. I mean, I just lost one yesterday. She was not only a gifted teacher, but she tutored after school. She was dedicated to her school. Her child is a senior in high school right now, her youngest, and she will not live to see him graduate. And that was yesterday was extremely terrible day. And that story is all across this state for a lot of individuals, for a lot of my colleagues. And so, if we really want to show them that we care about them the way that we say that we do, we need to put the money where our mouths are. That's all I'm saying. Thank you.
So I was going to preface my remarks that I was going to give you a sobering statistic, but I think what Tia has said should be probably will be one of those sobering things we hear today. I would like to note that Louisiana educators, paraprofessionals, school bus drivers, janitorial service, they have all been at work. We've heard nationwide about, people walking out, but Louisiana educators have been there. They have done their job. And so the statistic that I was going to share was actually quoting Dr. Brumley, I believe, in Wilson Tell's article back in October. He says, especially striking data showing that 44% of teachers quit in their first 5 years from 2016 to 2019. If you talk to our colleges of education, they will tell you that young people going into education is almost zero. So there are many things that we could do. There are many things that we talked about doing. I agree with Dr. Corville that we've all talked about this, where we need to reevaluate how we fund education. We can't do that right now, but what we can do is give our teachers and your school employees a pay raise, because they have been there, they have done the work, and they deserve that. And I think that's the fair thing to do. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'll make the speech that I usually make around this time of year, that we find ourselves once again at a 1.375 proposed increase, when we've always said for years now that the 2.75 was the goal. So I would just point out to the point that my friend Dr. Corville made, is that we continue to negotiate from this end, and we always go the opposite direction versus up. That's my question to Mr. Darden about being able to negotiate from that end. I stand by the 2.75. I also stand by putting it in level 1 funding. I believe that districts and charter schools should have the ability to take those dollars and allocate them to their greatest needs and their priorities. I think that will most often be educators. I know not everyone on this task force will agree with that, but we have consistently, as an organization, LAPC has advocated for the 2.75, that it be in level 1. And I would speak directly to Bessie. Well, Mr. Darden said that the governor has a priority that includes K12. Bessie's role and responsibility, and people ran to be on that board because they do the work of K12, period. And therefore, I would hope that that body will send a message to the governor, to the legislature, to educators across the state, and to taxpayers, that K12 is their #1 priority. We should not shortchange those teachers and those that are doing what we have come to realize, probably more so than ever before, how critical schools are to our communities. When we don't have good schools, when our schools are not open, this economy doesn't work, this world doesn't work. So I think now is absolutely the right time to take a stance and push for as many dollars as we can to flow directly into our classrooms. Thank you.
Janet?
Thank you so much for all your comments, Caroline, Keith, Cynthia, and Tia. We agree with everything that you said. It is time that we come to the table and continue to advocate for K12 and for full funding. We have not had full funding in years. Just want to remind everybody, we've had 1 increase in the past 10 years in level 1. So we would ask for our teachers do need to be recognized. And it's unfortunate that there's just a 40 million there. But also to our school systems, our school boards, our superintendents, there's a lot of money that's been flowing out from the school systems in regards to this pandemic. And although we are appreciative of the CARES Act money, it has been tied to certain things. And so we advocate on local autonomy and the
1.275 is important, and we'd be willing for the 1.375 to be in level 3, so we can protect that money for our teachers. But we also want to have pay for a 1.375 for level 1 for our school system as well. We are moving ahead with, we know that we're going to have a homework gap as well with our kids and catching them up. And our school systems will need this money to do what's best for kids. Thank you.
Or is that a motion, or are we just going to keep discussing for a while before someone's ready, or?
I will make a motion where I can let you know what we allocate for the team.
All right, Keith, go ahead.
All right. I learned my lesson on substitutes already like a few years ago, but I do want to just, right before I begin, if I can take a personal, well, not too great with the order, but if I can just address something. I know that some of us can be fiercely competitive, me, but I just wanted to know that as a Christian, I will keep you and your colleagues in my prayers, and I'm really sorry for your loss. I'm really sorry that everyone's had to go through that time and time again this year. And I will keep you and your friends and your family in my prayers. That being said, I wish this was like this so many years ago, because I think that we are all finally coming together, and I think there's a way we can do this, and I will be making a motion, and hear me out. I think this is something that we're setting a goal with, and I think the way we can frame this, and I may need some help with this, we can frame this as a, hey, this is the goal, this is the immediate near-term goal. You got the money this year, this is what you're doing, these are the areas that we're going for, and look, if you have extra money, you can put it to these areas, and we keep moving, and it's time for us to set the goalposts and not let someone else set it for us. Here is our motion. I'd like the following as an aspiration. And again, I'm going to need some help with this, so I appreciate your patience and your graciousness of all of them. First thing, we got to get to the Southern Regional average. And by the way, that's a moving average. From my understanding, we're now $4,000 away. Actually, since I'm not as smart as I try to pretend to be, these aren't even real glasses. You know, the governor's proposal actually makes it real easy for us, because all we have to do is move the decimal point or add a zero to it. That's it. You add a zero to the governor's proposal, that's a $4,000 teacher raise, that's a $2,000 raise for support. Not even saying it could be even done all this year, but we've got to set some kind of target and reclaim our position as a task force and an advocacy group for educators, for our systems. So that math is easy. You move the zero, you move the decimal, you add a zero. Next, in the spirit of cooperation, because look, y'all, I hate to tell you, but sometimes we do a raise and it ends up increasing costs for schools and for districts. You know, I think it's only fair, given what Dr. Falk says, what Ms. Romer said, and what we previously heard from our friends like in Lake Charles. You know, the fact of the matter is that districts keep having their hands tied. And the bottom line is they need an inflationary increase. And so let's do it. Let's do a 2.75 for them. Frankly, it should be more, because we need to catch up on all these previous years of non-inflationary increases. And if y'all are familiar with finance, I'm a bit of a nerd on the subject. But look, this market's inflated, and eventually that inflation is going to come to us, and we're going to have to deal with it then. So let's deal and get ahead of that inflation now and catch up to the past. And then finally, I know that this has been said in previous years, and I think this is where I'm going to need the most help. You know, different levels of formula, different discretionary funds for different initiatives that impact teacher effectiveness. Yeah, I think that's still an area that we should have extra money and add extra money. That shouldn't be at the expense of teacher raises, and that shouldn't be at the expense of, you know, inflationary increases for districts and LEAs. You know, the bottom line is that we still need to keep in mind efforts of teacher effectiveness, be it national awards, mentor teachers, et cetera. And so I don't know the exact numbers from that. I'm putting it out there, my own ignorance, and I would appreciate the assistance and support. But yeah, I'll take a motion. Let's add a zero to the governor's proposal. Let's get that inflationary increase. Let's get some additional discretionary spending for teacher effectiveness. Let's start reclaiming our work. Ooh, I wish I wasn't so shy, y'all.
All right, we have a motion. Anyone wants to second that motion? Just vote.
I second the motion.
Well, anyone else? Before I say anything?
What is the motion?
You're talking about aspirational goals here. We're not talking about this MFP, correct?
Yeah, we need to, I
All
think we
right,
need to
and I
separate.
think we need to separate this out.
Yeah.
I think as a task force, right now, today's mission is to make a recommendation to Betsy for this coming year's MFP. I would like to entertain something that we would meet again, and we would maybe begin to set some goals, some aspirational goals around things like teacher pay, around things like what does it take to run the school system effectively, and take a look at these issues for the future. But, you know, I am math, but I mean, that's sitting over here, but if we're looking at a $4,000 pay raise, if 400 and 200 costs 40 million, I'm just gonna say, I'm gonna put a zero on the end of that, that's 400 million. And then if we look at a 2.75% increase in level one at this point, that's another 80 million. So I think our chances of 480 million increase and then looking at teacher effectiveness this year is a little bit out of reach. So I would like to, for right now, look at this agenda item in a consideration of this year, a recommendation to Betsy for this coming year's MFP, and then begin to set some time for this committee to look at our future goals and where we can advise Betsy and where we would like to see us go in the future in terms of adequately funding the school system in regard to pay and operational costs. Does that make sense?
If I may respond in a comment.
All right.
I do think there's this, I'm gonna say it's unfair, but there's definitely this power differential at play. Mr. Darden, Commissioner Darden can literally attend the meeting and say, this is what we'll do, and if we have more, hey, we'll do it. And we're already behind in the football game, we're using that analogy. We need to say to them, if you have more, you will get it. Because that's what other agencies, other groups, other areas of the state are already going to be doing. And every time, we're set back. I don't know if it's meet you in the middle or if it's, hey, look, let's make this as an actual motion. It is aspirational in that I know it's not something that can be immediately done. But who knows? It might be done in 6 months. It might be done with other federal funds. It might take 2 or 3 years. But we have to separate the idea of something that we can do immediately and concrete from aspirational just being pie in the sky. It's aspirational because that's our vision and that's our goal and that's where we need to be. So I would say if there's some sort of way, Chairman Boucher, we make a recommendation to put an asterisk on it to say, this is what the recommendation is, we accept this recommendation, but it's with the promise of further funding being devoted here. Like, I think we have to be explicit today about what our goals are. Else, by the time they come out with that REC and then, different people start getting a crack at that, by the time they come out and say, hey, here's the extra money we have, someone else has already got it. I always feel like we're a day late and dollar short, but it's not a day late and dollar short for me or for you or for anyone else here. It's a day late dollar short for our kids, for our teachers, for our schools, for our parents, our families. Let's try. I think we should try to meet in the middle. I think it's. I use the word aspirational, but there's an immediacy to it, and it was a motion made with intent for today and for the agenda item on hand.
Well, the agenda item is the recommendation. So you're recommending this for the 2021, 2022 MFP?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's take a vote.
All right. Is anyone further discussion on this particular motion?
Can we go back over
clarity.
Well, I'm going to paraphrase.
You have to go to the minutes.
That for the 21-22 MFP, that we are recommending
Teacher pay
a
raise.
teacher pay raise of $4,000 and a support personnel pay raise of $2,000, plus an additional per pupil increase in level 1 of 2.75. And then the other one was a little fuzzy in terms of teacher effectiveness monies to encourage, I would think, PD and whatever.
Yeah.
So you want to limit the first two, or you want to keep the third one in there?
Yeah, I don't have a number on the third one, but I know it's something we need to do. Maybe I'll save that one for another meeting. Yeah, let's go with the first two first.
The 2.75, if I can ask a percentage increase, is that recommended for level 1?
Level 1, 2.75, price tag of about 80 million. Then you're looking at bringing to the SRED, not bringing to the SRE, 4,000 per teacher, 2,000 per support person, and just down and dirty estimate, 10 times 40 million, $400 million. So we are recommending that Bessie send a formula over with a $480 million increase for the 2021-22 school year. Further discussion on that? Yes,
Just for clarification, the teacher pay rate is in level 3 or level 1?
level 3.
Do a substitute motion.
Okay, Ms. Pope, the substitute motion.
I move that MFP Task Force recommends to Bessie the adoption of the MFP 2021-2022 to include in level 3, $40 million for dedicated pay raise, for 400 for teachers, 200 for support workers, as proposed by the governor in the executive budget, plus a 1.375 increase in level 1 base per pupil, which will go from 4,015 to 4,070, recognizing that last year Bessie substituted an MFP that included a 2.75 increase in level 1 base per pupil, which that MFP was not adopted by the legislature. I'll have that in writing.
Okay, motion by Dr. Pope, second Mr. Brockhouse. And then just for clarity, level 3, $40 million with 400 and 200, and a 1.375 per pupil increase in level 1. Discussion on the substitute motion. Okay,
I'm real shy, and people have to make the substitute motions. I will say this, just kind of as a meta comment, and out of complete respect, I feel like, as a committee, we argue against ourselves, we shortchange each other, whether it's whittling each other down with substitute motions, or, just a normal debate and discussion on what's reasonable or unreasonable. What this is a recommendation, and it's early morning. We can go with the recommendation. There's no need for a substitute motion. At the end of the day, I will support, anything that provides money for teachers. But I'd really say that, guys, y'all, it's not even a minute. We're already negotiating ourselves down.
any other further comment? Discussion, yes?
Just a clarification, so the total cost would be around $80 million.
Around 80 million. Is that correct, Ashley? Yes.
The last meeting I talked about the 2.75% increase. Pretty much that's it. I think this does represent, in two different ways, right? With part of it being level 3, part of it being level 1. The 2.75, it's sort of what we've always talked about. I think it's fairly reasonable. I got the impression from Commissioner Gordon that if there's additional money available, I think there will be pressure. Obviously, he and everybody else here will put that pressure on the legislature to pour that into direct teacher raises, I think. But that level 1, there's not going to be anybody else putting any pressure on anybody to get that if we don't get it. So that's why I'm really in favor of this. Because we're the only opportunity to get money in level 1.
Well,
Yeah, I mean, historically, the 2.75 is, as you know, a very old number. It was
Yes.
just plugged in at the time, and we use it every year. And I think they use it because we're familiar with it, to figure out how much money is available. So they'll come up and they'll have half of it, they'll have a full amount of it. And they'll say it's going to be equal to $40 million, it's going to be equal to $80 million. I do like the motion from the standpoint that we're going to put some of them, it's going to be a guaranteed pay raise. On the operational side, yes, it does include extra costs when we do that, because you may or may not know that in a lot of school systems, there are index pay raises. And so there are things that are tied to the teacher's raises. So if the teacher gets a $400 raise, as you index for other folks that may have additional work days, additional duties, or additional administrative responsibilities like administrative people. Those are indexed as well. So there are going to be some additional local costs. by splitting it out this way and leaving some of it, putting some of it in the base, it gives the local districts flexibility to cover some of those costs without dedicating it all to a pay raise. And essentially, it is a pay raise for their people, but they're not having to bear the burden of that that's been imposed upon them. So splitting it out this way is probably a better thing to do. But the other thing is as we're going forward, we come together in February, the first time, now March, and it's right before it all starts to happen. We can talk about aspirational goals, but we can't wait till February to do it. Because right now, we're just basically, we're sitting here, we just have to make a recommendation based on what we know right now and what we think is available. $4,000 is unreasonable for 1 year. Just see it, that's a 13% increase in the amount of funding. It's just not gonna happen. But if we submit something that's reasonable, if they've got a surplus and they've got to allocate some money, then yeah, we throw our name in the hat and say, hey, we need some of that extra money. So I just think that this is probably going to be a better option right now, but we're probably going to have to meet a little sooner to start talking about aspirational goals and make it known we'd like this to happen instead of waiting until we get to a point and say, oh, well, let's throw something in there for education. Let's throw 1.375%. I think we need to start our process a little sooner.
Okay. Jim, did you have?
Yeah, with the motions on the floor with regard to the salary increase, does it mention the cost of benefits in there?
Retirement, yes, the 40 million includes that.
Right, but does the motion mention?
The motion said to put $40 million into level 3, which would be about 400 and 200. Beth, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, that $40 million does cover, and what I've heard them say was that it would be identical to the governor's, and the governor's does include the retirement costs.
So the motion says identical to the governor's.
Okay, Keith.
Okay, I won't use the word aspiration, I'll try to be a little bit more direct than that. Mr. Bourne, I appreciate the feedback, but very directly, I want to understand, help me understand your thinking. Why is something unreasonable for Louisiana, but good enough for Texas? I mean, that's a simple thing. That percentage increase in their pay was larger than the figure we're talking today.
Okay, let's just pull this back a minute. We have a recommendation, we have a motion on the floor, and that motion is the 1375 in level 1, and the equivalent of 1375, $40 million in level 3. So, any other further discussion on that motion? Go ahead, Dominic.
Sure. Just for context, I don't have a particular opposition to this proposal, but I just want to put things in context. The current budget is propped up with essentially $900 million of money that goes away at the end of the fiscal year. And then they found, with most of the federal resources and some other maneuvers, about $1.1 billion. So you got about $200 million worth of new money. That's a simplification, but basically, of which $40 million of their proposal was for the payers. That's about 20% of the new money. I don't think you'll be able to get the additional $40 million unless there's additional money. And the commissioners seem to think there would be additional money. So probably how this would play out if you propose this is that would happen if there's a sufficient increase in RAC. And this, I think, sets down a marker, essentially says this is what we want. And then, then if RAC comes in and it's sufficient, we don't know how much that's going to be. It could be a $10 million increase. It could go down. We don't know. So I think that stakes out a pretty reasonable claim. This is all on top of the fact that $700 million that goes away at the end of next fiscal year. So I mean, I do want everyone to have that sort of understanding. I don't know that issue needs to get fixed in this task force. I don't know that that's necessarily appropriate, but I just want to have that in context when we start thinking about the overall health of Louisiana's fiscal situation. I just want to make sure that's really it.
Okay, I'm going to pause right now because I know before we take this vote, we would have to have public comment on this. So let's take public comment and then we will take a look at voting on this measure. Do you have cards for that?
There's parts of this, anyone have to do like fill out a card? I don't have any.
Any public comment? All right, no public comment?
Chairman, is this comment just on this motion?
Yes,
Okay, like the substitute motion, okay, thank you.
public comment on the motion.
Michael Falk, Executive Director of Louisiana Association of School Superintendents. A lot has been said about funds available statewide. There are decreases in local funding in several areas. Yes, we do get the CARES money, we do get stimulus money. Most of that is directed to specific purposes. There is some general, but it's outlined. School systems are facing declining enrollment. The operational costs are going up, the healthcare costs are going up. They're having to do things now differently, and that requires a shift. Sure, we would like more money, but we have to also be reasonable and understand that this state requires a balanced budget be submitted based on the revenue estimates, and that's what we have right now. The additional monies, if they come to fruition, I believe people will put it as a priority, and that way the legislature can approve it and not have to send it back to Bessie, and we can move on from there. But it's Bessie's responsibility to submit the formula. It cannot be changed. It can either be accepted or rejected with some modifications. And I think this is our best bet to have something go through the process. So
Thank
that's
you, Mr. Falk.
my speed.
Do we have another public comment on this? Okay. All right, back around the table here. Any other comments before we vote? All right, could we take the vote then, please?
Before we try and make one quick comment as well. So my chairperson, Berkeley, I have a quote that sits on my desk and it's popping in my head right now, so I wanted to share it with you all. And it kind of charges me to step out of my comfort zone. So I'm hearing the conversation today and I'm so grateful the way this conversation began because I was absorbing your information and I was taking copious notes as well and learning from you all as I always do. And I'm hearing a like-minded premise and vision, and yes, we need feedback into our teachers. I think we could all agree that this has by far been the most difficult year in education and my teaching career thus far in 13 years. I mean, you have more years under your belt than I do, and I tip my hat to you all. And the quote that sits on my desk, it says, "If not you, then who?" And so I feel like maybe that's the idea that we're trying to do today. You know, like this is the MFP Task Force. It starts and stops here as far as making motions and making change. And you know, each and every one of you that sits in these chairs on this task force, you are agents of change. And the decisions you make today and moving forward in the right direction have to be somewhat attainable and also aspirable. You know, when I think of teachers, I never think they should lower the bar because each and every day, all they constantly do is raise the bar for kids. I know when I was a teacher in the classroom and you gave me a kid that was in the EdSat and I had to move them to mastery, I did it. You know, and I was relentless and I didn't give up on those kids. So I'm asking you, don't give up on teachers today. And then also, as we're moving conversations, and they may vary. I feel like we started on the same path and then we kind of meandered a little bit. And I feel like that's where we are right now. And before the vote is taken, I would like to remind you of that vote. Because I do feel that change is going to happen. It's going to start here. And the question I'd like to ask, and something that's kind of echoing in my head, is I heard Commissioner mention that there would be conversations again in April, perhaps, before the bill leaves appropriation. Will the MFP Task Force be convening before that occurs?
No, what happens at this point is Bessie must send over a formula by March 15th.
March 15th, okay.
I mean, well, It has to be sent over.
I see.
So it'll go over to the legislature, then it's in the legislature's hands. They can either act on this particular formula, they could reject the formula, they could act one way or the other, or they can send it back to Bessie to modify. So they can accept, reject, or send it back. At which point, if they send it back, then Bessie would sit down with the recommendations from the legislature and take a look at it again.
In the past, I've heard the conversation bounce back and forth, and we constantly are moving the chains since we're making football references today. Back and forth, and I know I've always been an advocate of the 2.75 increase. And it does feel as if that 1.375 is a fallback at oftentimes. So I'm going to encourage you all to not fall back. And then we're going to vote, not you, then who? Thank you.
Well, we're recommending the equivalent of the 275 right now, if this passes. 1375 in level 1 and the equivalent of that in level 3. So splitting it up. Did we have another comment card?
I think they wanted to comment after the vote, but I thought it was
Are you all commenting on the agenda item?
It's on the agenda item.
Well, if it's on the agenda item, I think we have to hear it prior to voting on the motion. So we have Ed Kansian, St. James Parish.
Okay, so, right,
Ed, I think you can project your voice, so come, just stand right there and talk, please.
Chairperson Bocce, members of the commission, thank you very much for allowing St. James to come before you. We come before you not in isolation, we're honored to have Representative Ken Grass, District 58. We have collaborated with Senator Price, Senator Lambert, with House Speaker Clay Shakespeare, Dr. Janet Pope, LSVA, Dr. Kate Brumley, Ms. Sino, thank you so much. I stand here with Mr. Grove, our president, and no, we didn't have a hurricane, Madam Chairperson, but we did have an economic disaster in St. James a few months ago. The Shell convent facility has closed. It costs like $1,400, Representative. It just devastated us regarding sales and property tax. And we do have a sheet that summarizes everything for the committee. The issue is this: the scene owner have done simulations for us. However, the way it works, as you well know, Chairperson, is that it is 2 years in the arrears. The devastation is hit now, 7.5 billion and more. So we're asking for some relief if it's possible. It would come under the emergency assistance provision in level 4, if the commission would so consider. We have talked to Ms. Kiara Jones-Orange. We've tried to make this a very collaborative process, and Dr. Willis explained everything. I don't know how much detail you want me to go into this motion.
If you've worked with simulations with the CNO, are we talking, can you just give us a round figure then? Instead of the total weekend?
So, as far as ad valorem taxes, fiscal year 21, we had $30 million, and we are expecting fiscal year 22, 26 million, losing approximately $4 million there. That is at 50% of its value. If it's zero value, it would be $8 million. We've been working with our assessor. We're hoping for a 50% value. In other words, the property, the facility has value. In terms of the sales tax, it's approximately $3.5 billion. That's why we use the number $7.5 billion in next fiscal year, Ms. Chair.
Okay. Thank you. Representative Brass.
Good afternoon, everyone. And Madam Chair mentioned, Representative my district encompasses Central Parish, Gabriel Parish, and of course my hometown parish, St. James.
This plant, supposedly this plant definitely is going to have a huge and tremendous negative impact on not only families, but as Senator Costello mentioned, we are scheduled to lose over 1,400 jobs throughout the parishes, primarily focused in St. James County. About 800 of those are direct shell employees, with the remainder being contractors. In addition to our families being impacted negatively, our local school district will also be impacted tremendously. So this is also going to have a negative impact on our planning, on our teachers, and most importantly, our students. So what we come here today for the delegation is to ask you guys, please consider adding some additional emergency funding in our level 4 of the MFP to offset the funding because of the lag in 2 years in MFP based upon revenue. We definitely have some conversations with our Speaker of the House, and also representative of St. James Parish, along with Senator Price and Senator Lambert. They're all on board. We have support this initiative. So we just come here to reach out to you guys and also ask for additional funds to be placed in their program prior to it becoming invested in office. I do have, and fortunate enough to sit on a House Education Committee, so I've been through this process a couple of times. Conversations there that I've been able to witness and listen to has been what's this person from different level. Definitely play my support along with the field to make sure that our teachers adequately paid. So, with that being said, we would like to have measures, if at all possible, included in the tier level 4 of the NLP as a recommendation that you guys send to Bessie and ultimately come to our house and send the committees for approval.
Thank you. Mr. Groves.
My name is Greg Groves. I'm the school board president. I'd just like to say to answer this, it was a unique event that occurred. And we're just asking for some assistance at this time. Like I say, the amount is not known. However, we know it will hit us pretty deep. And we just don't want to interrupt our educational process for the kids and the program offering in the parish at this time.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask Ms. Zeno, I know in the past, when we've had an unusual event, I know in the floods in 2016 here in this area, we did something in one of the MFPs, we had some language in there. And Beth, would you speak to that a little bit about what we've done in the past?
Right, so in 17-18, there were 2 revisions in the formula for that year. One addressed the natural disaster dealing with the floods, and that particular provision allowed for some criteria, and if that criteria was met, there was funding provided. It ended up being allocated about $7.8 million to about 3 systems that met that criteria. But in that same year, there was also a provision in the formula that allowed for contingency if it occurred. It had to do with Vernon Parish and the fact that they had anticipated that a lot of their military officials would be deployed and that the family would leave and the school system would be devastated because the families normally go back to like other states or other locations if in fact all the military personnel leave. That actually did not come to fruition, but it did provide a contingency in the formula for some assistance for that to occur. So we do have some precedents set back in 17-18 that did afford some assistance to some special situations.
Is that language still in the formula, the last one that we adopted?
No, according to the attorneys, we cannot put aspirational language in the formula. It has to be just accomplished within 1 year. So that in the next year, in 18-19, that language had to be removed.
Well, I think what we need to do with that, since we don't have everything right in front of us, all the figures, between now and our Bessie meeting, we would ask Beth to run those numbers, and that information can be provided to Bessie at our meeting next week, along with whatever recommendation we're coming out with for the state. for Bessie's consideration at the actual meeting where they will adopt the formula. So I think we need to do it that way because we don't really have the details on this. Ms. Holloway?
Yeah, Ms. Boccia, is it, just to clarify in regards to their request, are you referring to a simulation with that on the impact? Can that be done?
Yes, we have run some numbers for the superintendent and the school board president, Mr. Brass, with regards to different scenarios because they don't know officially what's going to happen. So we do have that. I think maybe. Right. And we could bring that in some language, I think is what I understand, is Boche saying, some language that would probably enact something like this for Besser's consideration.
Right, because I really don't think that's the purview of what we're trying to do for a statewide formula. This is going to be an isolated incident that Bessie would have to consider, just as they did with the flooding, just as they did 15 years ago with Katrina and any major event, that would occur. Okay? All right. Steve?
Can we still, as a committee, let them know that we endorse this, that we support this?
Certainly, certainly.
You can direct the department to.
Okay. Well, Ms. Polk, would you agree on the motion that you had that we would ask Bessie to take a look at the situation in St. James for consideration of placement in the 21-22 formula?
Yes, ma'am.
And would you accept that, Mr. Brockhouse, your second?
On the condition that I can speak.
On the condition that what?
That I can speak.
Yes, sir.
Calcasieu just lost 25% of their assessed valuation from Hurricane Laura and $13 million in the MFP. You want to talk about special consideration for 1 year. If that doesn't qualify, nothing. So let's not do that without doing this. I mean, I don't know where that ends.
Well, let me make an observation and because I know exactly what you're saying in Southwest Louisiana, yours in particular.
I mean, I realize we're almost in Texas.
Well, let me just say this. We have lost this year 12 to 15,000 students. 17,000? All right, that translates, and I can't do necessarily the math because it's all through, maybe $60 million? All right.
The 12,000 in the formula generated about a $67 million loss.
Okay. Now, we all know how that works. At the beginning of the year, in the state's budget for this year, the 2021 budget, they estimated an amount for the MFP. The adjustments are made during the course of the year, based on the October 1st count and the February 1 count. In the October 1st count, we've lost 12,000 students, correct? October 1 count, 12,000 students. That's going to mean statewide, the MFP this year is going to cost the state less money. We all saw it when that adjustment was made at mid-year. We're going to get a further adjustment based on the February 1 count, which, are you anticipating a further loss of students?
A slight one, yes.
A slight one. So we're looking at least $67 million that this year, we are returning to the state general fund because it was in the budget, but our numbers did not necessitate, I mean, we're not going to get it all because the formula is based on our numbers and what the formula says. So I would say, Carl and Mr. Brockhouse and whatever legislators here are present, in the supplemental appropriations bill for this year, I mean, I can't speak for the Besson Board as a whole or for anybody around this table, but if we're returning $67 million to the state general fund, that we would ask for consideration for those school districts that have lost significantly this year based on the decline in student enrollment and the massive hits by those storms, that there be some consideration in the supplemental appropriations bill for this year.
Can we ask separately?
Yeah, I think we need to separate these two.
And this is, so the recommended by legislators, we come to the MFP Task Force and ask for this, so when this goes to the legislature, there's a follow. But then to advocate on behalf of, the school system.
Right, I think we have to kind of separate the two.
Yes, ma'am.
Go with our motion for the 21-22 and ask for the special consideration for these items if that's what we're looking for.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, and no objection to the special consideration. I think that absolutely makes sense. I do want to clarify about the additional money that, not going after school boards, the 67 million. They're taking that money, administration is proposing to take that money, and that's part of how they're funding next year's budget, including next year's proposed pay rate. So it's not like there's an extra $67 million around. They're essentially lowering the amount used on lottery, and then they're using lottery next year. So they've already accounted, that money's already been spent. If you look at it. Okay, maybe it's fair, that didn't tell me that, okay.
I don't know if we carry that over.
What else are you using the lottery fund?
Using the lottery.
They're spending the general fund and they're lowering the lottery fund.
Yes, they're just,
I know from the very inception of the lottery, when it was all supposed to go to education, it was always, we'll give you this, but we're taking from this.
Yeah.
So we really need to.
I just wanted to clarify, it's not like there's an extra money out there.
And if there is going to be any excess, and I'm not trying to be argumentative, but if there's going to be over a $200 million excess, we think that these particular situations would merit some consideration.
Don't disagree with that at all.
Okay, so, all right, quickly, Keith.
I actually wanted to see if we could make a substitute motion, since it's popular. Seriously, I think that it's not enough to just ask legislators about something. I think that the recommendation, and I think in all fairness, any district that has a one-time unique situation that impacts 10% of their budget should get it. I thought there's enough money in a $36 billion budget to have 400 million, whatever raises. I certainly think we have enough for Calcasieu too. We need to put, St. James, we need to put Calcasieu in as a recommendation with the rest of the recommendations on that substitute motion.
Okay, I think one thing we have to realize, we're looking at next year's budget. This loss was taken this year, so we can't necessarily, I don't think, recommend that particular one for after the fact for next year. So let's separate these, we're going to separate these motions. Go ahead and recommend for the MFP for next year. And then along with that, if we want to have a special consideration, that we ask Bessie to consider at its meeting, that we do so. Okay? So, motion on the floor right now for a vote. We're recommending a 1.375 increase in the per pupil on in level 1, and an additional $40 million in level 3 for a teacher and support personnel pay raise. 400 for teacher, 200 for support person. Okay, please roll call.
Mr. Bourne?
Yes.
Mr. Brockhouse?
Yes.
Superintendent Crumley?
First of all, in regards to aspirational work around the pay for educators, I've always been an educator pay champion and will always be. And I'm just concerned, Keith, that your aspiration isn't aspirational enough. But that's a conversation for another day. In order to advance this motion to Bessie as a recommendation, I'm going to vote yes, but at the same time add that I regret that it does not address additional consideration for teachers in high need schools, additional consideration for teachers who have an in-demand certification in a needed area, performance compensation, as well as teacher leadership to pay for mentors and master teachers. But my vote is yes.
Mr. Castile?
Yes.
Mr. Claxton?
Yes.
Dr. Corville?
Yes.
Mr. David is not in attendance. Senator Fields? Representative Garofalo is not in attendance. Mr. Garvey?
Yes.
Ms. Gleason?
Yes.
Mr. Hartley? Not in attendance. Ms. McReynolds?
Yes.
Dr. Mills?
No.
Ms. Monaco? Not in attendance. Ms. Nevels? Not in attendance. Ms. Polito? Not in attendance. Dr. Pope?
Yes.
Ms. Posey?
No.
Dr. Procopio?
Yes.
Ms. Romer?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
No.
Ms. Stubbs? Not in attendance. Ms. Boucher, would you like to vote?
Yes.
And for the record, our ex officio members, Dr. Baker, Mr. Buell, Ms. Fonger, and Ms. Whitney will not be voting. The motion passes.
Okay. Now, let's, with the recommendation to Bessie for special consideration, would someone like to make that motion?
Motion. I'd like to make a special recommendation to Bessie that, you want to set the threshold of 10%. Yeah, let's do it. You know, they need support.
Dr. Pope?
I'd like to request staff to craft a formula for emergency assistance in level 4 to assist districts that have suffered any significant negative economic impact, whether it was plants shutting down, whether it was hurricanes, tornadoes, snowstorms, whatever. Thank you.
No. Okay, is that, are we the same motion, or?
I think that,
Answer up, take that.
I think that, I think maybe a substitute, because it's different in here.
Okay.
But for the
Okay, hold on,
department
hold
to
on.
study it,
Wait a second. Hold on. All right, Keith has made a motion with the 10%. Do I have a second to his motion?
You want to combine them?
I want to substitute.
Okay, dies for lack of session.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
To maybe that, when you spoke to what's happened in the past, remind me, is the precedent that it does set a threshold, or can we do away with this, that Bessie may ultimately set that themselves?
There was always some kind of criteria, yes, that we knew ahead of time, you know, we had some kind of information that set a criteria.
So that's the study and then recommend,
Okay,
right?
why don't we, I would suggest that we make it in concept and let Beth run the numbers and present that then to Bessie as a recommendation coming from this committee, okay?
Perhaps, if we have the language it shows, that provisional language that you made mention of, the criteria and how to be met in the past for the, so the 17-18, could that be shared with us as well?
Oh, yeah, it's actually in the formula that's posted for 17-18. We can get it to Shannon, she can email it to everybody.
Right, we'll go ahead and let's just do this in concept.
Yes, ma'am.
And then as far as the criteria goes, I think we need to take a look at what we've done in the past to make that recommendation. So in concept, we're looking at, Dr. Pope, you want to say it again?
Repeat. Request staff to craft a formula for emergency assistance in level 4 to assist districts that have suffered a significant negative economic impact event.
All right, is there a second to that?
And that can include COVID, snowstorms, hurricanes.
My second one.
Second by Mr. Paxton.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir?
I apologize. I assume that you were able to see, one press that button, but the system doesn't work that way. I wanted to be recognized, if I may, before we vote on this motion. If I may, Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
Let me first, I have been pretty quiet at most of these task force meetings because I'm in somewhat of a unique position, along with Representative Garofalo, and I guess members who are on the Bessie board as well. I get a second bite at the apple. In fact, I get the last bite at the apple. And so I try to sit and listen and learn as much as I can from members of the task force. Some of you have been members for some time. But I've been tussling and trying to figure out this teacher pay raise for a long time. And it's like a four-step process. First, the governor submits his executive budget, which he has. That's the first step. The second step, the task force makes its recommendation to Bessie. And then the third step, Bessie makes its decision. And then the final step, we as the legislature ultimately make the determination to accept or reject the recommendation. I was going to vote no on the last vote because I really don't think we're in a position, I'm in a position to say yay and nay because we have a revenue test estimating conference that's going to be in April or May. And hopefully we can realize more revenues. But I would like the task force to at least get some perspective of how I feel. Teaching in this state is a profession. And teachers are professionals. And we should recognize them as such. The governor had restraints, I know, because he had to submit a balanced budget. Hopefully we can recognize through revenues. I do not feel comfortable at all not giving teachers and paying them for the work that they do. And I think that there is a sentiment among legislators where they want to do just that. And so I want to say to the teachers, thank you for all you've done. And if there ever was a time to give teachers a pay raise, that's respectable. That time is now. Because when other teachers across the country walked away from the classroom in fear of a very serious pandemic, our teachers didn't. They stood there. They not only put their lives on the line, but they put the lives of their loved ones on the line. And I just want to say to the members of this task force, do not, I don't think members of the legislature take what you do lightly. And I would hope that Sandy, between now and before the Bessie board sends the MFP to the legislature, I would hope, Mr. Castillo, that Bessie and legislators work to try to figure out a way, particularly if we recognize additional monies, to pay the teachers for the work that they do. And I just wanted to say that, and I thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me to do that. And most importantly, I want to thank the teachers for all the work y'all have done in such a difficult time.
Thank you, Senator Fields. I think you've expressed the sentiment around this table, and that most of us hold that same sentiment. And I would hope, I think the timing of all this is very difficult for everyone. Like you said, the governor has to put forth a budget within recognized revenues. This group has to meet only knowing that information. Bessie has to make a decision. And then in April or May, y'all are going to make some determinations. It's possible to put money on the table. And how do we go about doing that? I know in the past, Bessie has asked, when they send the formula over, that if there is additional money recognized, that it be sent back to us to be included within the formula. And we would certainly appreciate your guidance on how to do that and make this happen. Because I think everyone feels that our teachers deserve a significant pay raise. So I'm sure, Sandy, if you wanted to react to that, I mean, I'm sure she would be, as President of Bessie, very interested in that and making that happen. Sandy, do you?
Yes, absolutely, and you're so on target, Senator Cleo, in regards to this. And we had a conversation last Thursday during our leadership call, and Ms. Doris was with us along with Kate, and we spoke about this, the urgency for this task force, and also when it comes to Bessie, about what teachers deserve and how will we move forward with that. And the conversation was, we need to have this partnership with you, and along with Representative Roy Garofalo and other top legislators. We talked about President Page and also like Sheikh Senator. How can we come together to make this happen, to make certain that we all that are included in this know that this is important for our educators who have done such an amazing job in this pandemic, and with or without, they work very hard and they deserve that. So I know that there's a work that's being done after this meeting to have this collaboration together to move forward. But thank you, your words are so right on target. And teachers need to hear that, because they feel like, where are the legislators, how do they feel? They know how Bessie feels, that we want to do these things, but where are the legislators to put education first in our state? And this is the way, first step of doing that. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Boccia.
Okay. Thank you all. We have the final, hopefully final motion on the table that we recommend Bessie consider looking at those districts who are suffering under those conditions. That will then give a report based upon what we've done in the past. We have a second to that motion. Any objections to the motion? Hearing none, motion passes. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Dr. Falk, Mr. Moore.
Y'all